So I had made my living as a visual artist, both as a jewelry designer, but doing also nature-based work and community work. And I really had this false identity of like, I am the artist. And I looked very successful from the outside. Grant awards, different awards, all these accolades lined up. But on the inside, I was a mess. And so when I started graduate school, I had to really, for art therapy, I had to really start working on aligning the inner and outer worlds. And so that for me was the second main answering the call to start a hero's journey and redefine who I am as a creative.
You're listening to the Midlife with Courage podcast. This is where women in midlife come for inspiration, motivation, and sometimes a little education to help them flourish after 40. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Midlife with Courage. I am Kim Benoit, your host. I'm really happy to have you here, and I'm also really happy to have my guest here today. Her name is Jodi Rose Gonzalez. Welcome to the podcast, Jodi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, and hello to your audience. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, great. I'm really excited to talk to you, another Wisconsinite. I'm so
Yes.
excited about that. So why don't you just first tell the listeners what you want them to know about you?
Well, thank you, Kim. In preparation for our discussion, I was listening to some of your previous podcasts, and I know that you like to ask people when was a time in their life that they felt courageous? And I've been
Yeah.
thinking a lot about that because I think I have somewhat of a unique perspective. I don't
Mhm.
know, actually. But
We
what I
all
do
have a
know
unique perspective.
what I do know is that courage has meant different things to me at different times in my life. So I could give different examples. And alongside that, I think there have been many periods of my life that people have called me courageous. And underneath that, what they didn't see was that I had tremendous fear and I didn't feel courageous at all. I felt there was a necessity or a truth, or, I wanted to rise to an occasion or just show up. So that superseded any fear that I had. So moving into midlife, and specifically more in the last 5 years, courage for me has been more of being a mindful, authentic, whole person, like letting go of worries, letting go of limiting beliefs, understanding my negative self-talk and stories and where they come from. And so for me, courage is like the old show up and just be you. People said that to me my whole life. Just be you, Jodi. You've got, you're smart. You've got what it takes. And I'm like, what does that mean? How do you just be you? And I've started to figure that out maybe just a wee bit,
Yeah.
in the past 5 to 7 years through creative practice, through yoga, through mindfulness. I really think that it takes courage to have boundaries. It takes courage to know who you are and to express yourself and take a stand for what you believe in. It takes courage to let go of your codependencies. So I think like currently, and I can give specific examples of how that shows up, but that's what's courage for me, like right
Mhm.
now, is to be myself.
Be
And I think
yourself.
that we often have a very masculine version of courage or definition of courage,
Mm.
where it's like courage under fire or build your muscles of courage. And for me, I think it's much softer. I think there's strength in softness. So
Yeah.
courage is like, again, knowing what limits you and just identifying those things, working on them, working on mindset, and letting them fall away.
Yeah. I love that. Strength and softness. I love that. That might even be the title of this episode. That's just amazing.
Ooh, I like that too.
That's kind of cool. So let's go back a little bit, and I want to come back to that courage because you have this beautiful visual. Of course, you're an artist.
Mhm.
You would have a
Mhm.
beautiful visual for people. You're an art therapist. You are a
Mhm.
yoga instructor, specialist, expert, all of the above.
Mhm. Well, I'm a yoga teacher, but I don't yoga on the mat doing the stretches. That is sort of like but one thing. It's called asana, doing the poses.
Mhm.
And I don't really teach that anymore. As I advanced in my practice, essentially the broader definition of yoga relates more to mindfulness and
Okay.
knowing the true self. Again, becoming aware of the mental
There you go.
patterns and things like that. So there's a lot to yoga philosophy that infuses my work and my teachings,
Mhm.
specifically the connection of the mind body, and I can speak to that later when we talk about art-based mindfulness and creativity.
Sure.
What does that mean? So, yoga philosophy very much infuses the other creative work over here.
Okay, cool. So you weren't always doing these things. You had a previous career. Did you start out as a jewelry designer? I think I read. So tell us your story. We want to go to your story about how you changed
Yeah.
and things that happened maybe influenced you or transformed you.
Sure. Well,
Talk
I've
about
always
that.
been a big fan of the hero's journey. Um,
Ah,
and so I've always loved the idea of like living your life as a story, writing your own chapters, being intentional. So that's one side of things. When I was in my late teens, I had an eating disorder and went to treatment for that. And that's where I was first exposed to the tools and resources that I use today. That was my first call, really, to like face my shadow and to have resources for doing so. And so, that started one journey. And through the exposure to things like yoga and mindfulness and art therapy, that just art therapy in particular, it really gave me a new voice, a new way of connecting with myself. And I was just really fascinated with it. It also gave me permission to be a creative. And so from there, I started my career as a jewelry designer. And I also worked for nonprofit arts organizations. And in doing that work, I just became incredibly fascinated with what was going on under creativity because we were doing a lot of community arts projects, and the group dynamic behind these community projects was just fascinating to me. So that
mhm,
informed going to school to become an art therapist. And so graduate school was, I think, the next big hero's journey. So I had made my living as a visual artist, both as a jewelry designer, but doing also nature-based work and community work. And I really had this false identity of like, I am the artist. And I looked very successful from the outside. Grant awards, different awards, all these accolades lined up. But on the inside, I was a mess. And so when I started graduate school, I had to really, for art therapy, I had to really start working on aligning the inner and outer worlds. And so that for me was the second main answering the call to start a hero's journey and redefine who I am as a creative.
sure,
Um,
sure. I think a lot of times, a lot of people that I've talked to on this podcast will say, I look like I was very successful on the outside, but
mm,
inside I was, like you said, you were a mess. Can you maybe share a little bit about how that manifested, what that looked like or felt like? Because there might be listeners out there who are
mhm,
like, I'm wondering if that's what I'm
mm.
feeling or experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, incredible fear to put myself out there in the world. So I was holding myself back, thinking
Mhm,
small, afraid to take advantage of certain opportunities. We think, oh, an opportunity, great. But if we're afraid to show up, if our confidence is
mhm,
lacking, if we have low self-worth, to like not even give ourselves permission to try. So those were some of the mental demons that I
mhm,
experienced. But yet there was something inside of me that was like so bright. Like, it's like do it
mhm,
anyway, because I knew from my recovery, if I didn't listen to these little like callings or inspirations, it would show up like it would flare up, symptoms of that mental health issue. And
sure.
so I think, and what I would really like to share for people, whether they have a mental health issue or are in recovery or noticing like moments of depression or stuckness, like these things aren't bad, they're just stop signs to look
Mhm,
and say like, okay, what's really going on? How do you explore that? How do you use that as information and then course correct in whatever way in your life? And so I knew for me moving into my 40s, I just had these big dreams and I knew that I was in the way of myself. Nothing, no one was
mhm.
stopping me except me. And so
Yeah.
that's where, again, permission, the courage was to be like, well, let's face these things. Let's notice these stop signs so that we can move forward.
Mhm.
And, systematically then just to start to address things.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And creativity to me is so many different things. And I've seen the work that your nature art,
Mhm.
and it's just beautiful and that's amazing. And it's, I know a lot of artists don't always get that success. How can, if we feel like, well, I'm not that creative, that's, first of all, that's a lie because everyone's creative in their own way, right?
Yeah.
So how can we use that to let go of those limiting beliefs, those things in our mind that are saying, no, you can't do that, or you shouldn't do that, or no, whatever.
So how, I love this question. How do you give yourself permission to be creative? And one of the points I'd like to make is that how we roll in creativity is often how we roll in life. So if you're saying like, I'm not creative enough, like, does that self-worth or that idea of not enoughness show up in life? And so it's like give yourself permission to say, I am creative enough. As I offer it, there are many tools. We use nature, we do mandalas, flower petals. We tend to have like this definition that you have to be able to paint or draw to be creative. So I
Yeah,
think if we can just put that aside.
sure.
And then again, noticing, being mindful about what comes up for you about like not being enough. So there's like a comparison aspect there, or noticing if a lot of times there's a creative trauma. Is that a belief, the fact that you're not an artist or not creative could be comparison to a sibling, or it could be a comment made by a teacher or an adult. Like, where did that piece get shut down? Because as children, we're very creative. We're making up games and imaginary things in our play.
Yeah,
Drawing is a natural communication and self-expression tool. When, we're like 5 to 10 years old, like that's really, we think in pictures. So we've moved through
hmm
these stages of creativity in life, and somewhere that falls off the block for a lot of people.
hmm
Noting also that we live in a culture where we're expected to make there's the stigma of the starving artist. So it's like if
yeah,
we're not good enough or if we don't have a degree, therefore we're not creative or we're not artists. And that's just
mm,
not true. So I think
right.
number one, just exploring like where is that narrative coming from that you
hmm
can't be creative? And then just the willingness to try something or notice where you are creative. I get a lot of people who say, I'm not creative, I can't draw stick figures. And then they lay out this amazing, like, food display. Like they're incredible
Yeah,
chefs, and then the way they arrange things on the tables or on the plate are just gorgeous. And it's like, well, let's give ourselves reverence to where we are
yeah,
creative, and notice that it all counts. And then there's a lot of moving forward in the conversation, there's actually a lot of science that demonstrates that no matter what the modality, there are definite benefits to creative practices.
hmm
Um,
yeah.
for what
I was one of those people who thought, well, if I can't draw, then I'm not an artist, I'm not creative. But I am aromatherapist. I can create beautiful blends that people love
Yeah.
and exactly what they need. I can write. I created some affirmation cards myself. Like I came
Oh,
up with that. So, I have creativity in me. I just had to find out what it was and how I can express what I need to express. So
yeah.
I guess what you're kind of saying too is you need to just find that, explore and find different things. And it's okay if
Mhm.
you can't draw more than a stick figure. That's okay. We don't need you to.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And it does take courage to do that self exploration. And
Mhm.
because, I mean, a theme of almost everything I do is go to the root problem, the cause, what's going on. Don't just
Mhm.
stay on the top surface and look
Right.
deeper. And that kind of sounds like what you've been doing too with your mindfulness and yoga and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have a podcast and you sent me your latest episode, which you wrote a letter to your younger self.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And if we can go back to that strength and softness and the definition of courage, you have a
Mhm.
beautiful visual of courage. And could you share that with us? Because I just think it's amazing.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you for the compliments on the episode. It was actually, I made that after doing a talk for our local women's fund. And then I did it as the podcast episode with the journal prompt because I had such incredible feedback after that talk. First, what I think courage isn't, I don't think that it's about building up a muscle. To me, that it makes me anxious because if there's something I need to be courageous for, the idea of like mustering this energy is like over the top. Like I can't handle that. So for me, I just
Oh,
really
yeah.
needed like a softer definition. Again, that strength in softness. And so I liken courage to a hot air balloon. And I don't think of courage as something that's like separate from our true self essence. I think that it's like intertwined. And so I think that as we move through life on the hero's journey, rising to certain occasions, rising above challenges, the things that, as I was saying, like limiting beliefs, our worries, our negative self-talk, I think of those as like tethers that hold the balloon to the ground.
Hmm.
And I believe that that balloon, like it just naturally, it wants to rise. Like your spirit, we want to grow. We want to feel more connection. We seek wholeness. And I think courage is just intertwined with that, and it wants us to show up. And so courage is like the fuel that helps us rise. And so as we do the self work, as we practice mindfulness, as we let go of these limiting beliefs, we start to remove those tethers like scissors, just snip snip.
Yeah.
As we heal our traumas, as we manage our self-doubts and seek support, we start to just snip those tethers. And of course, new tethers show up all the time. That's part of
Hmm.
mindfulness. But I think that as we address them, we just rise.
Yeah. I love that. And I just have all these beautiful pictures in my mind. And I love how you said the courage is already within you. And
Yeah.
that's one of my themes too with people. Like you already have all these wonderful, beautiful attributes inside of you. We just have to bring them out and let go of
Mhm.
what's holding them back.
Right.
I just love that.
It's like, and once we address those things, it's like phew, we just elevate, we
Yeah.
ascend, and so I just
Yeah.
think courage is a natural part of the human experience. I don't think of it as a separate that we need to call up or, flex.
Yeah.
Maybe at
Yeah.
certain times we need to flex, but I don't think we
Yeah.
need body build like,
Yeah. I'm not flexing, but
right.
but I mean, really to that point, if it's to me, when you say, oh, it's something you have to go and get and work for, I
Mhm.
love that you change it around. It's already there. You just have
Yeah.
to take those. I just love that. That's amazing to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for that.
Mhm.
And if we extend that a little farther too, with the air balloon, my understanding, limited probably, but so far, because I don't like the word limited. But anyway, they have to go where the wind kind of takes them. And so you may be
Mhm.
going along your path and okay, well, something else, this is happening, so I need to go this way. You know what I mean? I mean, we could just
I
keep going
do,
and going.
and I do, and I absolutely love that because what you're speaking to is being able to be present, being able to be flexible and go with the flow. That's
Yep.
not easy at all. And
Mm-mm.
so I think it definitely takes courage. So an example, like I used to, before interviews, I would think of really smart sentences and write them down and be like looking down and looking for the moment to have my cool sentence any sort of time. That's trying to
Ah,
steer, where now
mhm.
I write down maybe a few points that I'd like to be able to bring out or have them
Yeah,
there if the question is asked. That's
sure.
like following the breeze, and having
Yep.
the confidence to just go with the flow. So I
Yeah.
hope that helps your listeners with some specific examples about what it means to just ride the wind.
Yeah.
'Cause,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
I just love that.
and there
Oh
is
my
some
gosh.
control too with if courage is the fuel and it's that flame, you
Yeah.
sometimes you turn it up to go higher or to move faster, but I believe there
Mhm.
is some steering involved. Like you can
There
still
has to
steer.
be.
So that means there's intention. You can go with the flow, but also be intentional.
Yeah,
And intention might show up as boundaries.
sure.
It might show up as, I mean, of course, there's many aspects to intention, but thank you so much for helping me broaden the
Yeah.
balloon like
Ooh,
explanation. That's great. I love it.
anytime. Yes. Well, I'm a very visual person, so I guess that helped. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's just amazing to me. We have a hot air balloon festival every winter, of course, here in
Oh,
Hudson. And that's so
no
I've always,
kidding.
yeah, it's really
Yeah.
cool. Really, really cool. Like a whole bunch of them all go up at once. And
In the
if
winter in Wisconsin, like,
in
so I live across the
February,
state from you. Wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's
I
nothing
didn't
else
know
to
that.
do in Wisconsin in February, so they decided to have a hot air balloon festival.
I'd
So,
like to come over and meet you, and we should go in a hot air balloon together and have a
oh
crazy
my
time.
gosh, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? Oh my gosh. Yeah, we'll make that happen.
Anyway, we
That's gonna be
digress.
okay.
So
I know we're going off on a whole different tangent here, but so tell us a little bit more how you help other women, or I'm assuming you work with women. Do you work with men too?
I work with men also,
Okay.
but primarily women and
Okay.
teens. Yeah,
Okay. And how do you help them? If you just want to just tell us a little bit about what you're doing to help
sure.
other people with what you do.
Well, I have a clinical side of my practice where I partner with local mental health organizations, and there I work with teams of like psychotherapists and other service providers and case managers to help people who have a diagnosis or, a very specific service plan, and then I'm like a very specific piece of the puzzle. But in the broader sense of teaching art-based mindfulness, I work with people to learn how to redefine what creativity means for them, and then use specific practices and processes to, on the one side, manage anxiety and stress, and on the other side, do self-discovery work, personal development work. What's beautiful about the practices I teach it is that one activity can do both. So we like that. It's very efficient.
Ah,
Um, and
multitasking.
and specifically what that means, and I hope that this part of our conversation might inspire people to give themselves permission to realize like doing creative activities really does have it's an evidence-based thing. It really is helpful for especially managing anxiety and stress. So doing activities that are rhythmic, using materials that are soft, or things that use both sides of the body, these things call up the parasympathetic nervous system, or in other words, your rest and digest. So when we're stressed or anxious, on some levels, our body is in fight or flight. So
Mhm.
this means for the women out there who love knitting, that's both hands and it's rhythmic and it's soft. So they probably know knitting
Mm,
is, calming, but
sure.
maybe sometimes we put knitting aside because it seems, well, literally fluffy. There might be too many demands, to give oneself the time. But I work with a lot of women who, like, suddenly they have permission to crochet again because they realize that it is actually like a very powerful coping skill when life gets stressful. And it becomes like a prescribed intervention. So
Interesting.
the person who cooks, chopping, chop, 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 that's rhythmic, right?
Oh,
Doing things
yeah.
in the garden, that's a creative act. You're moving both sides of the body. So, like things that seem so obvious or subtle or not these big movers in managing stress and
Yeah.
anxiety, it's like they actually have a huge effect. So when the body's parasympathetic nervous system is called up, or the rest and digest, you feel calmer because your heart and breath rate lowers.
Mhm.
There are different brainwave patterns that are generated that are associated more with relaxation, even to some extent, like very similar to monks in meditation. And the body starts to decrease the production of the stress hormone cortisol.
Mm.
So, doing any creative act, like whether that's watercolor or drawing, they say like 30 to 40 minutes is what starts the decreased production of
Oh,
cortisol, but it really takes just a few minutes to drop in doing these other things, especially if they're rhythmic.
uh-huh.
Um, and then the other side, I think when we think of like art therapy or art-based mindfulness, it's like draw your emotions. But what if you don't know what you feel? What if it's so overwhelming? How do you sort your feelings if they're too complicated? So just doing things like quick mood doodles, little scribbles, just line and color. Like if for me, angry is very like sharp and jagged. For those that are listening, I'm like moving my hand up and down.
Yeah,
And that's then for me, calmness is more like a smooth wave pattern. The colors are probably more pastel or more muted.
sure.
So just doing little doodles like that and then journaling about the doodling can
Mm.
just really help move the energy of the emotion out, and put it in a tangible form, but then also help you derive more perspective around it. Teach very specific journaling activities that can go even deeper into the symbolism of the imagery. But essentially, it's basically just journaling about your piece is enough. Those are the two ways that I help people is like to help them develop the insight and self-awareness. So that means specifically like, what are those limiting beliefs that are coming up? As we're dealing with life and things are surfacing, how are we handling that? I work with women who are going through change. So maybe it's perimenopausal, menopausal. Think about all the things that are happening in our lives at this age with aging
Mm-hmm.
parents, with kids that are leaving the home, thinking about retirement, financial security, perhaps changes in career or relationships. So
Mm-hmm.
those are all of the things that I help women when I'm working with adult women. Most of the women that I work with are, in their 40s and 50s. I work with some
Mm-hmm.
younger ones, but
Yeah.
largely I work with our age
Our
and
age.
using creativity to manage these transitions, which,
Yeah.
our bodies are changing and anxiety is often a byproduct. Think of all the stresses associated with all the things I just ticked off that were,
Yeah.
or checked off in terms of what we're
Yep.
dealing with at the stage of our lives. And so we see things like, bad habits coming up, drinking more, maybe coping with these things that give us stress and anxiety in unhealthy ways. And it's like, well, you can use your creative practices to help manage that. And then also to gain insight to be more intentional about how you respond to these stressors. And it's a lot of fun, actually. People are
Yeah.
usually pretty amazed by how simple and how depthful it is once they have a few tools or resources
Yeah.
under, filed away. And then also realizing that they don't have to be an artist for this to
Right.
work. One
Right.
of my favorite activities is flower petal mandalas. And
Oh,
I'll just give a little story here.
yeah.
So, just going out to the garden or taking a bouquet that someone gave you for Mother's Day or your birthday, whatever, and just tearing apart the petals and just creating a circular form, making patterns with the petals. So, the sensory aspect that I was talking about, calling up the parasympathetic nervous system, think about like you're smelling the flowers. You're
Mm-hmm.
present with the colors and the textures. So it really brings you into the body and gives you the calming effect. And there's a kind of a meditative aspect to creating this like mandala, this circular form. Then journaling with it. I had done a flower petal mandala that had these like layers or rings of colors. And I
Mm-hmm.
created this during a time when I was really stressed out. I was going like 140 miles an hour, just like a lot going on. But in this case, I did it in the grass, like to feel the grass against my legs, to be working with the flower
Mm-hmm.
petals. It's like it brought me into the body. It calmed me down. It slowed me down. And like suddenly I was hearing the birds again.
Uh,
Suddenly I could like breathe a little deeper. And then when I journaled with it talked about the natural succession of things like the I might screw this up. The daffodils always bloom, then the tulips, then the irises, somewhere in there, the lilacs. It's like no matter what's going on year to year, that is always the natural succession. And the wisdom of the piece as I did the dialoguing technique or the journaling technique was that things happen in their own time. Just slow down and stop trying to force it. And so
oh,
I
yeah.
like to share this story because these are the wonderful relaxation benefits and also wisdom reminders that we can receive by doing these very simple creative activities. And anyone can do a flower petal mandala. Like you
Yeah.
don't need to draw to do that. So it's a
Right.
powerful and gentle, again, that strength and softness. It's powerful and gentle at the same time.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Kim here. I just wanted to remind you that I have a brand new product on my online shop at midlifewithcourage.com. They are beautiful affirmation cards just for you. These are a product that I created. I'm very proud of them. They're called your Daily Dose of Courage. Each day you take a card and you can go in order. They are numbered 1 through 31 for each day of the month, or you can just take them out at random. Use them just to give yourself a little positive message. Maybe you want to use them as a journaling prompt. You can even use them in the evenings before you go to bed as a way of just having a little positive, courageous message to read before you go to sleep at night. So go to midlifewithcourage.com and go on the online shop. The link is right there on the first page, and grab your copy of your Daily Dose of Courage affirmation cards. Oh, I love that. That is amazing. And we do know when we go back to talking about lowering your cortisol that that's a kind of a key in perimenopause to kind of help balance out your hormones is to lower
Mhm.
that cortisol. So here, ladies, is another way that we can do that.
Yeah.
And if
And
they
for
won't,
the non-artists out there, I mentioned before, like just jumping into the creative practice, not worrying about having to finish anything, not having
yeah,
to be like something you'd hang on the refrigerator door. It doesn't have to be on exhibit anywhere. But it is
yeah.
really fun to make homemade brushes out of things like pine needles or grasses and just use painter's tape around a little stick. And just paint on
Oh,
newsprint, and get some tempera. You can get a little six-pack of tempera for like $2 at
yeah,
Walmart, but making marks with both hands. So again, engaging both sides of the body. There's a joy in doing this. Like it's just kind of makes the inner child feel very creative and free. So it's just
yeah,
fun. You don't have to worry about doing anything perfect. But again, it's
yeah,
using that right side, left side, which is very calming on the nervous system. So that would be another tip I would use
for
for
sure.
people who are like, not sure about sticking their toe in the creative waters. You
Yeah,
can do handmade brushes or use regular brushes too. But
yeah,
again, the tactile quality of using nature, like cedar, using ideas from our
yeah,
parts. Cedar makes different sounds and smells than pine needles, and it's just really nice to be present with those types of materials. So,
yeah. Oh, that sounds so cool. I'm gonna try some of that.
oh, it's
That'd
fun.
be cool. Yeah, yeah, very cool. And like you said, it doesn't have to be something that's going to go into a museum. It's for yourself. It's to
Yeah.
benefit yourself. So,
Yeah. Well, just one more, just making marks with like oil pastel or crayon or marker, just breathing, taking in
mhm.
a deep breath and making a long mark, like just moving your hand away from you. And then as you exhale, just bringing the mark back towards the body. So there you're really
Oh,
deepening the breath. You can just switch up colors. You can switch up directions of where you're moving on the inhale and exhale. Then at the end, you
cool.
have like this paper with all these marks. You can just cut up the paper and make bookmarks or cards, like give it away as gifts.
Oh,
So there's just a lot of fun ways. And I do have on my YouTube channel a lot of these little video ideas. They're like two to
okay.
three minutes long. So
Oh, wonderful. So why don't you share with us? That was a great segue into where can people find you? So, and
Mhm.
we'll put all links in the show notes for them. But if they're interested in finding out more of these or kind of going back and
Mhm.
trying some new things, where would they find you?
JodiRoseStudio.com. So it's Jodi, JodiRoseStudio.com. And when you get there, there's a little pop-up that gets you to my newsletter sign up. You can also go directly to Jodi Rose Studio /offerings. Now, once you get into that, you'll receive an email that has some of these video resources. And one of the resources is my free community, which is called the iRose Society. And so the separate link there would just to go directly to that would be jodirosestudio.com /society. So there's the structure of getting one art prompt a week, and then there's a online Facebook group that goes with it. But every week you'd be emailed an art prompt, an affirmation related to that theme, and then some journal prompts. So for people that are like, wow, I really like this
Mhm.
idea, like that will give you a framework to actually get moving started. And once you sign up for society, you get as well some of these curated project ideas that I've just shared in the video, so you
Okay,
don't have to go searching for it.
sure.
So when you sign up for the offerings or for the newsletter, like I said, you'll get these other tidbits of information. But each week also I share about the themes in my podcast. So the
Okay.
podcast is called the iRose Podcast, and I give case studies. So it really helps bring some of the ideas that we're talking about to life. Like how do these creative practices show up in a way that helps people, usually women or because I work mostly with women, but they're women's issues, case studies, and the way that they work with materials in different ways. So
Yeah,
that can really help if you're wondering, well, how would this work with this theme in my life? There's a whole bunch of podcast episodes that
sure.
address fear, grief, for example, vulnerability, career
Mhm.
change, things like that.
All the things we
All
go
the
through or we
things, yes,
consider.
indeed.
Yeah, yeah.
But jodirosestudio.com is the hub for
That's the
sure where
go there and you'll find it
inspiration.
all.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Jodi, this has been so amazing, and there's so much more that we could talk about, but we do have to say goodbye at some point. Is there anything that maybe we didn't cover that you want to make sure you tell us, or is there something you want to say again?
Having turned 50 last June, I have to say 50 has been my favorite year. And when I
Oh.
was like in my teens, I couldn't like I was like I can't wait to turn 50.
I saw that and they're like, what? Tell us about that a little bit.
I don't know why. I just had this sense that I would be like, I'd be where I want to be in life. Like, I know that life is a journey and we're picking up teachings all the way through. I think I was an old soul to begin with, first of
Yeah,
all.
sounds like
But
it.
whereas all my friends were like, can't wait to turn 18, can't wait to turn 21, those
Yeah.
like early, I was like, I can't wait to be full on 50. I think that as women, when we turn 50, like for me, something just fell away. Like, I'm just doing, life is short at this point. I'm doing things my way and I'm doing there's not a lot of time left to like be thinking about doing something in the future. Now is the time. And so just like claiming these last things on my bucket list, like that's
Yeah.
exciting and having the courage to do that and the internal coping skills, the skills to do that. So I just like being in perimenopause and like the 43 to 50 was just a really wonderful transitional stage. Like all the physical things were going on,
Mhm.
but it really set the stage for moving in a beautiful way into this next stage of life. And I have felt incredibly peaceful about it. And people ask me, how do you feel about being 50? And I was like, great. So I
Yeah.
just, for those of your listeners who I think that they're listening because they're wanting to embrace midlife in a positive way. So I'm probably speaking to the choir, but for those that are having troubles with it, like,
Mhm.
again, exploring the mindset that it's okay and it can be an unfolding that is very beautiful.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Wonderful. Wonderful words. Thank you so much.
you're
I
welcome.
feel like we're gonna be connected again sometime, so I'll say goodbye for now, maybe.
Yes, yes. Well, I'd love to come back. And I just feel because you're so nearby, like I feel
Yeah,
maybe there's a collaboration in the future
I
somehow.
think so. Yeah, I've got some ideas in my head. So yeah, this
Cool.
is wonderful. Awesome. I love it when that happens. All right.
Yes.
Well, Jodi, thank you so much for being here today. And I know my listeners have loved this.
You are most welcome. It's been wonderful to meet you, so thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Midlife with Courage podcast. I hope you liked it. If you did, please leave me a review. It is so very appreciated. Even better, send a link of this episode to a friend. Until next time, take care of your beautiful self.